So we have founders from our fourth cohort. I see Ram from Outplay and several others. We have founders from our third cohort, second cohort, and our first cohort. And they come from India, Indonesia, Vietnam. I see Afif from Bangladesh, uh, Singapore. Obviously, Singapore is a big contingent. So they've come from across. Okay, shall we start, Joy?
Yes, we can kick it off. I think we've got quorum. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Hey, so guys, Saiki, I'll just do a quick intro of you, and then hopefully you can introduce Neeraj and the rest of the team and the firm.
Yeah, sure.
Hi everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday Talkies. So Saiki and Neeraj, this is something we do. Once the Surge program starts, which is twice a year, we run this 15-week program. Surge runs on Thursdays, usually sort of 9 a.m. India till about 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. India. Then on Tuesdays, we have an hour and a half, which is very specific to a topic, and it's optional. So folks who are interested in that topic can come. So this is a Tuesday Talkies session. It's sort of calendarized every week. We cover different sort of topic. Joy and the team go out and get very interesting, relevant topics to talk about. So that's what this is. You'll see this thing referred to as a Tuesday Talkies. So everyone, welcome. Great to see all of you. Some of you I haven't seen for a while. I see Mr. Vivek from Pentester. And many others, which is great. So guys, it's my great pleasure to introduce Saiki and Neeraj, who are the co-founders of xto10x. I'm going to have Saiki introduce Neeraj and several other team members from xto10x who are here. But I'll take a minute to introduce Saiki. Saiki is the co-founder together with Neeraj of xto10x. He's, as I'm sure he may or may not mention, he's often mentioned that the idea of xto10x originated at a breakfast table with Binny Bansal. For those of you who are not in India, I think the second cohort would remember Binny. Binny came and spoke to our second cohort in Singapore. Binny was the co-founder of Flipkart, which up to this point has been the most successful startup that India has seen. Walmart paid $20 billion to acquire Flipkart. Saiki actually spent 15 years at McKinsey, was a senior partner there, and then left in 2015 to go to Flipkart, work very closely with Binny and the rest of the team. And he actually he actually was the head of eCart, which is Flipkart's supply chain business, and then went over to Ola, which is another very, very successful Indian startup where he ran the marketplace at Ola. So great mix of sort of strategy consulting, startup across multiple sectors. But I think the most interesting, at least I think, the most interesting thing that Saiki is doing is xto10x, and I'm going to have him tell you guys more about what xto10x is and what they're doing, and then today they'll specifically focus on employee NPS. But I'm a huge fan, as Saiki, as you know. I think they're building a very, very special firm with some very, very deep insights, tools, processes that can help companies scale, which we'll talk more about. But I think the one thing I'd say, I'm so glad to see many of you here. Look, I think what makes great companies is really all about talent and culture. And I think very few startups, especially in our region, focus on talent and culture until it's really too late, right? And 5, 6, 7 years in, generally most startups in India and even Southeast Asia end up with terrible people and terrible culture. And not surprisingly, long-term, those outcomes become also terrible for those companies. So it's very important, as we've talked about at Surge, to get the right talent into the company and also build the right culture from day zero. What Saiki and the team will talk about here is very, very relevant. And I think, Saiki, you'll have to share with us at what stage of a company they should start thinking about this. But certainly this ENPS, employee NPS approach. Saiki, what we've been telling our startups at Surge is once you have a little, maybe 20 people or above, this is something that they should start paying attention to, because by the time you get to 400, 500, it really may be too late, especially if it's not going the way you want. So that's the context of today. With that, Saiki, thank you again, Saiki and Neeraj, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rajan. Thanks for that very warm welcome. Incidentally, today also happens to be my 20th wedding anniversary. And I had to justify to my wife why I was doing this one meeting. I've taken this day off for 20 years, Rajan.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We could have done it next week.
So this is the first time I'm doing a meeting in 20 years on my wedding anniversary. And my wife and I would have a tradition of going out for a movie and sort of like a teenage date type of format. And I had to use your name to justify the exception, Rajan.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Now she's going to hate me. I don't even know if she's going to hate me.
I don't know how much your life's worth anymore, but anyway, all the best with that. Thanks for the warm welcome. Interesting that you mentioned that xto10x is sort of finally the interesting thing I'm doing with my life, Rajan. I thought the 20-year slog was worth a little bit more than that, but I probably agree with you. That with xto10x, we're actually doing something really special. And so for everyone's benefit, hey everyone, I'm Psyche. Lovely to see all of you. So exciting to be a part of a group of companies sort of who are on their way and part of this very elite cohort. So very nice to meet all of you. So very briefly, xto10x, the three of us co-founders, Binny, Neeraj, and myself. And we started the company with a very simple mission of raising the odds of success for founders. That's what sort of gets us out of bed every morning. That's what inspires us. And there's inspiration in the air we breathe, water we drink, because of all of you. And that's why there was no question of refusing this meeting, Rajan. Of course, your invitation plus getting a chance to meet so many founders. So lovely to be here. Rajan has already introduced me. Too glowing an introduction. Perhaps I'll try to live up to it. But let me quickly introduce the rest of our team who are with us today. So there's Neeraj, who's my co-founder and also the CEO at xto10x. Neeraj, one of perhaps the more notable achievements in Neeraj's sort of very interesting career path so far is sort of he was instrumental in building eCart. So I led eCart, as Rajan mentioned, but a lot of my glory was reflected glory. Frankly, the hard work was done by Neeraj building an unbelievable operating machine. And one of the secrets of Flipkart's success beyond the product and technology is just how good Flipkart was at operations. And I think I can safely say a lot of the credit for building that operating machine like a machine goes to Neeraj. So Neeraj, thanks for joining us. We also have Arun, who also happens to be ex-Flipkart. So you'll soon start thinking that this is a Flipkart mafia at xto10x. We do have non-Flipkart folks as well, but Arun used to lead a lot of the charters in the people excellence team and spent 4 or 5 years at Flipkart building a lot of the people design practices there. And today he leads the people excellence practice at xto10x. So a lot of what we'll be sharing today is a result of the work that Arun and team have done. So that's Arun with us today. We also have Sonali and Karishma, who lead our GTM team. And thanks to Sonali and Karishma, we've had something in the vicinity of conversations with around somewhere between 250 and 300 startups in the last 3 or 4 months. So it's astonishing sort of the coverage Sonali and Karishma and team have been able to do with us over the past few months in terms of getting the message out on topics like this to a very large number of startups. So that's the team we have with us today from xto10x. Don't think I've missed anyone, right? Okay. So with that sort of brief introduction, folks, I'll jump right into it. I'll start by sharing my screen. We have quite a lot of ground to cover. We got so excited that we put together kind of all kinds of exciting material. We have sort of founder videos, we have self-assessments, we have tough questions you guys will have to answer. So we've sort of laid it all in. So let's see how much justice we can do in the next hour and 20 minutes or so. So I don't have the luxury of asking all of you to introduce yourselves to get to know you a bit better, but hopefully we'll get to know each other after today's session at some point. All right, so we'll jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. All right, hope everyone can see my screen. Quick thumbs up if you can.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, lovely. All right, so half a minute on the title, building your secret superpower, secret italicized and underlined. As Rajan said, this is not a topic that we pay a lot of attention to, particularly in the early stages of building our companies, because we're so correctly focused on getting to product market fit. But all of us know, it's almost an article of faith that we know great talent leads to great outcomes for all startups. But the reason it is secret is not that great talent is a secret. It is how to build great culture. That's the secret. And if I asked 20 of you, please jot down 3 points of how to build great culture, there's a pretty good chance that the answers will look very, very different. So what we've tried to do as xto10x in the course of our work with now something in the vicinity of 50 startups on this topic is to convert this very fuzzy topic, like what is culture, right? You can keep reading book after book and you still don't know what it really means, is to convert that into something that engineers can handle, a little bit more of an operating recipe, a step-by-step way to think about how do you actually get to great culture, right? And what we'll share with you today is also what we've seen based on that recipe across the startup ecosystem. So that's why the secret word is underlined, right? 10x People, by the way, is the offering that xto10x has that is focused on people engagement. Everything we do, like our OKR offering is called 10x Goals, it's 10x something. This one happens to be 10x People. All right, so 5 things we're going to talk about today. Let me go through them one by one. The first one is, yes, Rajan shared a brief introduction to us. Let us talk a little bit about why we feel a little bit qualified to talk to you about this topic today. I remember in Flipkart, I had a 6-month stint as head of HR. I don't know if you know that, Rajan, but I was briefly CHRO at Flipkart for a torrid 6 months. And the thing I struggled with most, and by the way, then we were 10,000 people. The thing I struggled with most is I had no idea what the pulse was of the org, what was going well, what was not going well. So we introduced this little tool called employee NPS, and no surprises why. We were very good at measuring customer NPS down to the last basis point of what was going on with customers, but we were equally clueless about what was going on with our own team members. So we introduced something called employee NPS. And now that's a tool we've actually productized and rolled out to many startups in the ecosystem. So that's why we feel we have a little bit of depth in this topic now from a startup standpoint. And I'll share a bit more about what we've seen so far. So that's point number 1. The second one is, I'm sure you don't need a lot of convincing. Rajan mentioned this is an optional session and you've shown up for an optional session, which means you already know it matters. But let us talk to you a little bit about why we see it mattering. What are some of the hard numbers and the hard stories about why this really matters and why you should pay close attention, not just to this talk, but to this topic more broadly. And we'll also share a few founder videos. I was joking with Kunal, Rajan, I was asking him, do you want to record a video for us, Kunal? I know this topic is very close to your heart. He said, hey, Psyche, Surge already has too much of Kunal Shah. So I told him, don't we all, Kunal? But anyway, so we have a little snippet from Kunal just for good luck coming in and his take on this topic, as well as hear from a few other founders. So that's topic 2. The third one now starts to get serious. And these sentences are written from your vantage point as founders of early stage companies. And you ask the question, Rajan, when does it matter? And when do you need to start thinking about this topic? So in the third piece, we're going to start making it a little bit more real for you, which is, okay, what is this culture stuff? Can you make it more real? Can you make it more operational for us? That we'll talk about in number 3. Number 4 is many of you are probably in that honeymoon period and you sort of have a happy, smallish team, 20, 30, 40 people. Feels like a family. Every day at work feels like you're amongst friends. And you may feel, hey, I don't need this. We're doing great, right? We get along famously as a team. Let me come back to you when I have 500 people. So let's talk in number 4 about what happens to ENPS as you start to grow as a company and why there is no time like the present to start worrying about this topic, to start thinking about this topic, right? So this, I'm a small team, I'm a family. We hear a lot of this from earlier stage founders. Yes, you're all set for now, but you still need to pay attention before you hit growth stage, and we'll talk about why. And finally, if you've done a good job with steps 1 to 4, hopefully we've got you in a mode where you want to get started. And we'll try and do a bit of that in today's session itself, where we'll get you working on 1 or 2 very quick exercises so you can actually start your culture journey. Hopefully in the last 10 or 15 minutes of today's session, we'll actually get you with us to walk the first 3 baby steps on the journey to what could be your great culture. So that's what we have lined up for today. Since it's a large group, I don't know how you usually run the format, Rajan. Maybe I'll pause every once in a while for sort of quick questions and comments, but we probably don't have the luxury to sort of keep it freewheeling as we go. So
yeah,
we'll
that
probably
makes sense,
pause.
Psyche. Yeah, that makes sense. You can pause occasionally, like after a while, and then.
Yeah. So
And,
after
and
perhaps,
all the founders are pretty used to. They'll put thoughts on the chat.
okay, lovely. So I'll just pause every once in a while, and then we can hear some comments and questions. All right, let's jump in. So that's what we've got lined up. That's the menu for today. This is why we feel qualified on this topic, increasingly so. 1 year ago, I would have been less sure. We've had about 130 startups who've been a part of roundtables like this, having fairly deep conversations with us on this topic. We've done about 40 employee NPS assessments. NPS, I assume everyone is familiar with the term NPS, which is basically the question saying, would you recommend this company to your friends and family? And if you get a 9 or 10, then you're a promoter. If you're a 7 or 8, you're passive, and 0 to 6 is detractor. And the NPS score is promoters minus detractors. So we've done 40 of deep assessments with startups. We have about 15,000 voices that we've heard, which is team members of all of these companies, and heard quite deeply. That if you look at this number, Arun, who leads our people excellence team, has actually been part of 1,500 conversations. I was blown away when I saw this number. Arun has actually been in 1,500 conversations with startup team members talking about what really matters to them in terms of great culture. We've got about 60,000 qualitative comments. You'd be amazed when you put out a survey in startups, people put a lot of rich feedback when they're filling, and we've processed 60,000 such comments, 600,000 data points. And we've now built an ML algorithm, which just based on the comments, without looking at your survey results, we can predict whether you're a passive or a promoter or a detractor to a 96% level of accuracy. Because the sentiment of your comment kind of gives away where you stand in terms of your ENPS scoring, right? So this is sort of what we've done so far. Arun, anything you'd like to add to that on the journey so far we've had?
I think you covered everything, Saki. For me, those conversations with founders, with employees, with leaders, the 1,500 employees cover, I think those have been deeply revealing. That along with the algorithm and the comments, I think the triangulation of that is what really makes it real for the founder when I go and do the debrief conversation. So. Yeah. I think the mix of Quali and Conti is something which, at least something which over the last couple of years has led to some powerful conversations with founders and people.
And it's so interesting, is building on your point, Arun, that a lot of founders have this sort of engineering bias to the data, but the penny drops in the debrief conversation when we share the quotes. It's amazing. You can show so much data around what's coming out of the ENPS assessment. But when you see a heartfelt comment from an employee that says, I don't feel I belong here anymore, that's when the founders sort of sit up in their chairs and start taking notice. So one of the things we've been very careful to do is not just do the algorithm and the data side of it, but also have the 1,500 conversations so we get the rich feedback from startup team members. So that's part of what we've done. These are the companies that we've worked with. By and large, xto10x works more with the growth stage, companies, but we have a few meaningful number, maybe between 10 and 15 companies where we work with smaller teams in that 20 to 50 team size range. So we today have a meaningful coverage of the startup ecosystem in India and Southeast Asia in particular. Let's start with hearing from founders who are a little bit further on in their growth journey about why they think this topic is important. You can hear?
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe culture and value is like this game of snakes and ladder. There is no way you can jump quickly on building it. You cannot increase NPS very quickly. It's through thousands of actions that you do over a course of a year that increases the thing. So think about them, snakes and ladder, where the ladders are really, really short, but the snakes are really, really long.
For me, culture and values mean that if Meesho is personified to be an individual, how do we as an organization behave, take decisions in times where like we as founders are not there.
A good culture is what happens behind your back, right? Not necessarily in front of you. And then you can sit back and be convinced that business results will come. But in reality, culture is a lot more like, who do you want to be? How do you want to live every day?
And this goes down to culture. Anything that you don't demonstrate on a consistent basis does not become way of life. And if it doesn't become way of life, it will actually never stay the same. It will go down, it will decay.
If I like an environment that I want to work in, generally speaking, most of the others will also like it. For example, I like to feel cared and respected. I like to feel trusted. I just want, and I like to know, and I want to have a say in where we are going.
Realize that as the organization grows multifunctional, multi-geography, bringing any behavior change becomes extremely difficult. So your core set of people who understands really become the ambassadors.
Whatever we wanted people to practice, right? It has to be demonstrated from the top.
It's all about first, you yourself demonstrating that, right? Which means that you have to make sure that you believe in that whole culture. We need to make sure that when we are talking about it, we believe in it so much. So that was one. Second is it's a constant process of talking to people about it. We don't believe in these mission vision statements that don't come from inside, right? From deep inside, because you need to believe in them, right? So otherwise you see some fancy statements which are put all over the place. What it does, it gives the company an identity. It gives it a personality, which you need to kind of, nurture, and it has to be believed in, it has to be executed, and it has to be simple. Yeah. That's critical, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work.
All right. So I think the reflection is Hari. Hari, who is a few years senior to me and has the energy of a teenager. On this topic, Hari's off the charts in terms of the level of energy. He's the founder of Big Basket, of course. Extraordinary company in terms of their achievement operationally. They have a 99.6% fill rate on a basket of typically 25 items. And if you ask Hari, what's the secret? He'll say culture, psyche. He'll put it in one word and then he'll decode it for you in terms of what it really means, how Big Basket built that culture of operational excellence. So this is not just fuzzy stuff. You can hear it from founders who've been on the journey for 5 years, 10 years, that when they look back, they actually pin their entire success and getting through the tough times. And all companies have those tough times. They pin it to having worried about this topic before it became serious. So when InMobi had their hard times, Naveen said, I remember most of the top teams stuck with us. And that's because this is a topic that we spend so much time worrying about. So I think the more than the words, I think the sentiment and the seriousness with which these founders speak is sort of what gets me. Hopefully that leaves you also a little bit more serious about this topic as we go through the rest of today's conversation. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's the sentiment side of things. And you've heard from a few founders. Let's talk a little bit about the numbers side of things and some headline takeaways from our work on this area so far. This is the employee NPS range for the startup ecosystem across the 40 odd companies where we've done the work. And that number, yes, you read it right. It's not 8 to 72. It's -8 to 72. And there is a meaningful, the bottom quartile of these companies actually is around the median NPS, around that number 0. So the thing to reflect on here is this is not because founders don't care about this topic or they're trying to be nasty. It's because if you don't pay attention to this topic, like you heard Rahul Chari at PhonePe talk about, the default way it goes is down. Just because of entropy of as companies get more complex, if you don't pay attention to this, you actually get pulled towards the lowest quartile. And the companies in the top quartile that are in that 55 to 72 range obsess about this. So one thing to remember, message to all of you is, This range is frankly a manifestation of a variable that's not being worried about so much by founders, but the guys who are in that 60, 70 range are paying a lot of attention to it, right? So that's message number one. Now, why should I pay attention to it? Message number two, when your ENPS is low, and this is the currency we use to give you a slightly harder measure of that culture piece, right? It results in high attrition. Okay, high, what does high mean? Let's look at the number, 35%. Detractors have a 35% attrition rate. In the company that was at the bottom end of this range, their tech team had an employee NPS of minus 26. So you can imagine if you're in that sort of state in your technology team for a tech-based startup, you have a lot to worry about in terms of keeping your talent, right? So that's the second thing to keep in mind. Third, an interesting positive phenomenon, and you've read a lot of the research about this, I'm sure, that managers, if you measure NPS at a manager level, which means just take my team and would they recommend me as a manager, managers with an MNPS of greater than 40 have a profoundly positive impact on the company's NPS. I'll show you a graph on the next page that brings it to life. But that's something to think about when you're hiring your teams. You're not just hiring for their technical competence in product or tech or ops or business. Remember, unless they're great builders of teams, you're going to create a management layer that actually cannot build a great talent proposition for you as a company, because this is probably the single largest variable that impacts your company NPS, right? And unfortunately for us, as a startup ecosystem, this is where we stand today. 37% of managers have a manager NPS of less than 0. And 53% of managers are under that magic 40 number. So the odds are, almost by default, if you don't pay close attention to the caliber of managers you're hiring or promoting into management layer, or giving them the appropriate coaching about how to lead and build teams, almost the default phenomenon in the startup ecosystem is the majority of managers are well below this 40 mark. So this is something to pay very close attention to as you're building your companies. And the final point here is the sense of pride. I think one of the things all of you enjoy, you're all building great companies, you're all in that early stage of pursuing a mission with high energy and passion. The great thing about where you are today is by default, chances are your teams have a high sense of pride, and that gives you a high employee NPS almost by default. If you don't have that sense of pride, it's almost game over in the startup ecosystem, because employees who don't feel pride in their companies have an NPS of minus 85. So it's almost like anyone in your team who doesn't feel proud about your mission or what you're going after is going to be a detractor, and not just a detractor, a big detractor. So these are some of the hard truths if you look at an ecosystem level about things to think about. One is a variable that is not managed closely. So you end up with a lot of companies at the low end of the range. Huge impact on attrition if the numbers are low. Managers by default tend to have relatively low scores. And if they do, it impacts your employee NPS very negatively. And if you have good sense of pride, you have something very good working for you already. Chances are you do as a relatively small team. Okay. Yeah. This is that graph on manager NPS. Not sure why it's not loading on the slideshow. I can see it here, but I can't see it here. Okay, can you guys see it here on the left-hand side? It's very, very tiny thumbnail size. Yeah, it's not loading.
No, can't see it.
Okay, doesn't matter. I can talk you through it.
What does it show?
Basically, what it shows is after a manager NPS of 40, the company NPS takes off almost vertically. So you have a company NPS that's in the vicinity of 20. And after you cross the 40 mark on manager NPS, it takes off almost vertically to 30, 40, 50 and beyond. So statistically, when you zoom out and look at the impact of manager NPS on the company NPS, it has a very high correlation after 40 and almost creates a vertical liftoff. And if you think about what drives manager NPS, it's the simple stuff: regular one-on-one conversations, fairness, and ability to add real value and problem solving. That's what matters to team members, right? So I'll just pause before we go into a little bit more detail about, there it is. Okay, let's see if I can load it up now. Yeah, there you go. So you can look at this. So at the 40 mark, when you get managers above 40, you see a vertical liftoff in the scores that companies have. So you can see the profound impact your managers can have. And it's simple stuff that sort of drives that manager NPS score.
Hey, Saiki, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but at companies like this, Google,
yes,
this manager NPS is so important. I'll give you an interesting story, right? So 80% is the cutoff. And for a manager who doesn't have more than 80, regardless of how well they've done, they will not get promoted. So I had one of my best leaders delivered 17 quarters in a row, over 70% year-on-year growth. It's just like, it was just crazy performance, right? And his manager scores were just consistently below 60. Wow. And I just number one, I couldn't get him promoted. And then I tried once or twice. And then I was obviously reminded as to how important, things are at. But anyway, finally we managed to, finally he focused on it and got over it. But this is so important. And I can't even tell you, because what will happen is, I'm sure you'll talk about this, right? Is managers who deliver strong business results, but their people hate working with them. And I'm sure each of you, if you have people managers, you'll learn about this quickly. You'll put up with it because they're delivering great results, but that's the real test. This is such a powerful chart.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, you said 80, which is mind blowing. We're talking.
Yeah. At Google, by the way, the number is 80. So if it's below 80, no chance. You will never be a successful leader at Google if your number is below 80.
Wow. And as you saw in the startup ecosystem, more than half are below 35 and 30% are around 0. So we know we have a lot of work to do as a startup ecosystem. And you can see, the data shows that after 40, it starts to really make a difference. And you saw from the previous page that without the high employee NPS, you lose your best people. Let me just pause there before Arun and I go a little bit deeper on, okay, we've talked about employee NPS. This is great, but now what do I do about it? How do I actually do something real to build this? Before we go there, any questions so far, guys? Any comments or anything you'd like to clarify?
Yeah, guys, you can unmute and ask the question or put it on the chat box. Okay, keep going, Saiki. The founders are pretty good about asking questions as they come up.
Okay, so there are some. Okay, I see there's some questions and Neeraj has already answered some of them. Okay. Interesting. All right, let's keep going.
You can't tell us who this company with number 72 ENPS is. I suppose that's confidential.
Well, the founder is quite proud to talk about it, but as a matter of principle, we don't talk the company.
Is it one of the companies that you had a video on to narrow the subset here?
No, but some of those guys in the video, are above median, Rajan.
Yeah, obviously, no. I hope you didn't have the really bad ones.
Yeah, I can tell you we are at 55. So that as xto10x, I can tell you where we are, and we also have some serious work to do. So that's not us. 72 is not us.
Okay.
So we have some work to do as well, but we're at 55. Not too bad. All right, let's go back in. All right, so let's briefly talk about how to make it real. And apologies for the life gets a little bit more complicated as we go through this now and take you through the operating framework. So what we've been talking about so far is this stuff in the roof, right? Which is culture, an overall measure for culture and why it matters. What we haven't talked about so far is where does it come from? How do you actually get to 72? And more importantly, how do you get the hell away from -8 for sure, right? How do you raise your odds of being in that top quartile? The stuff underneath that roof is what matters, Arun, you want to talk through that briefly?
Yeah, sure, Saki. So I'll start with the base. This is the most important one also, which is org principles, which is nothing but what do you stand for as an organization. This is almost like writing the PRD for your organization. And this has to be unique. This is, I've seen that this is unique for each and every startup. Just what makes you special. Once you have that, and on top of that, you build your processes and structures. Processes structures seem very counterintuitive for a startup, but this is that balance between too many processes structures, which can become bureaucratic, too less can become chaotic. So what is that right balance? And we have seen that some of these boxes ticking well is very important. And we're not talking Six Sigma processes, right? We're talking simple things like having all hands every 2 weeks for communication. So that's the kind of rituals we are talking about. Practices are your people practices. Again, here the important thing is how do you design some of these in accordance with what you have written down as principles in your PRD? Because there is no one size fits all approach to rewards, ESOP, hiring, or performance management. And your internal customers who are your employees will start asking about, like, how am I going to get rewarded? How am I going to get assimilated? So some of these things we'll also see in detail later, but just designing these in accordance with your org principles is what is important. The last one is people, which is feedback on leaders, managers, and your teams. And we saw like a sample of that on managers, which is also the most important component among people and has the largest impact on the employee NPS and overall organizational health. So this is like our attempt to put together, based on the all the work we have done with startups, our attempt to put together like what really constitutes building like a healthy organization and making that needle movement on your ENPS.
Yeah, thank you, Arun. And life begins in the foundation, as Arun said, which is the PRD for your org. What's the org you want to build? And I find that to be the most powerful statement. You spend so much time on your product, moving pixels around on the landing page of your app. But have you thought about your org just as much as you've thought about the product that you're building? And what's that org that you want to build? And what will be special about it? And that's not about downloading the Netflix manifesto or the Google value system, but what is it about you that will be special? That's where life begins, and that's the foundation. So as xto10x, we're very clear. We're the startup for startups. We're there to raise odds for founders. That's why we exist. If you care about that mission, you should be a part of our team. It's as simple as that. And all of you, the magic is all of you have some version of that. And that's where life begins in the foundation. But the question is, have you taken the time to think about it? And have you taken the time to spell it out a little bit more clearly for everyone on your team? One thing we will do later today is actually do a short exercise to actually help you write some of this down. So you have something to take home from today's session, but we'll come to that towards the later part of today's discussion. So that's the framework, right? That's the framework. Now let's show you a little very quick movie of from early stage to late stage, what happens in this framework, right? What really goes on. So let's look at the pre-intermission, sort of the early stage view of the framework. That's what you see. Right? What you're looking at here is for companies with less than 100 member teams, right? And this could be as small as 15, 20, as big as 70, 80. They have actually a positively biased employee NPS. Rajan, incidentally, that 72 company is also a company with fewer than 100 people.
Oh, wow. Is it a search company?
Unfortunately, no, Rajan. But
oh, unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
you get everyone in Surge to take this, and we'll try to push the envelope.
I just picked a few of them that have taken it, and they said they're in the 50s. I'm like, oh gosh, we are wasting.
So this is not a. So it's important to note, as all of you are earlier stage founders, as are we, as xto10x. Hey, 55 doesn't mean we're king of the hill. We're at median. That's median performance for a smaller team, right? So the smaller teams are from 20 to 72, right? And tend to be positively biased for obvious reasons. And you can see many of these factors Arun talked about on the previous page, like around having all hands, around communicating well, around having OKRs, doesn't matter so much because you're all sitting on the same floor, you're all meeting 3 times a day, people know stuff anyway. So you don't have to worry about this left-hand side of the page as much. But 4 things do pop up as important. The org principles one, very big deal. If people don't care about your mission, you have a problem. Development, not career. People don't care as much about, hey, am I getting promoted? But am I developing quickly? People care about a lot. And most young startups do this well, which is why it's green, but important for you to keep an eye on. And these 2 areas, performance and leadership behaviors, tends to be yellow or red. And by the way, guess who the leaders are for young startups? No guesses, right? It's us, right? So these are the 2 areas. Arun and I will come back and talk about some more, why you need to worry about these 2 areas a little bit more, even as an earlier stage company. So this is a quick photograph of what goes on in smaller teams. Let's look a little bit ahead. Now, if you look to larger teams, which is companies that are larger than 100 team members, this is how the movie changes. Let me click through that once more for your enjoyment and entertainment, right? Notice something about how the colors are changing. This is almost like a traffic light, right? That sinking feeling when you're approaching the traffic light and it changes from green to red. This happens almost by default. As you go from less than 100 people to more than 100, right? Almost by gravity, your employee NPS falls and many more issues light up as needing serious attention. So you can see here, alignment, decision-making, career, which was not important earlier, performance and rewards turn red, managers turn red, and org principles turn yellow. So if you're in a, hey, I'm a small team, I'm all set, and your ambition is to get larger, remember this movie. If there's one thing you remember from today's discussion, remember how these traffic lights are going to change on you by default, which is green turns to yellow and red as you get bigger. And we'll come back and double click a little bit more on these themes to give you more of a flavor. But remember, there's no time to install these systems once you hit growth stage. You're best off starting earlier, right? Everyone clear on that message so far? And my little animation trick, I'm personally very proud of.
I think, Psyche, that last thing that you just mentioned is pretty important, right? What you're saying is don't wait till you get to 100 people.
Yes.
To start doing these things, because at 100, if you're growing very fast, then it's going to be much harder, right?
That's right. And remember this low end of the range at 20, it collapses, right?
I mean, 20 you're finished, right? With 20 people, if you're at 20 NPS.
Then remember you got something serious to worry about. And there are many more areas that you won't have the time to install when you hit growth stage, right? So that's the headline message of, you do need to look around the corner a little bit on this topic. Okay, so now let's double click a little bit further on what goes on inside those themes for smaller teams. And Arun, I'll ask you to jump in here and elaborate a little bit more and bring these to life.
Yeah. And this is something we have been seeing. Org principles is a strength for smaller startups, and largely because it's operating within a room. There is a high sense of pride. There is inherently an alignment to the organizational values, because people know like what is the culture. People can feel it. People can sense it because it's all happening within a room. So that's what we have found in all the small startups we have worked with. And also just what makes these small startups special is something slowly starts like diluting when it starts growing, which is what we will see like going forward. But when it is small, when it is at this kind of a size, we have seen that it's sort of like gets like built organically. And we have seen that when the eNPS, when the sense of pride is not there in these small companies, which is like very small, we have not seen in these startups, when the sense of pride is not there, then the eNPS of those people are -87, right? -87. But so something for you to keep an eye on, this will happen organically. This will happen without putting a lot of efforts now, but something for you to keep an eye on, especially in terms of just the people knowing like what makes you special.
So you remember this, I think, read these quotes. Chances are you're hearing things like this from your team members. We believe in listening to people. We feel like a family. This is a strength for you by default. And you got to hang on to it with both hands, sort of double click, underline this and hang on to it with both hands. This is a big strength for smaller teams and earlier stage startups. Interestingly enough, even though you may not have a lot of formal systems around performance management and rewards, and as a founder, you think, hey, this doesn't matter so much. This is a weakness at 90% of startups, including earlier stage startups. And what you end up hearing is people don't feel celebrated or recognized, and they don't feel they understand the stuff. They say, yeah, we love this. We enjoy being a part of this team, but you know, what is ESOP? What does it mean? We haven't even raised any serious capital anymore. How do I value this, right? So just the lack of clarity ends up getting people quite confused. And you find some of the smaller teams, like one of the plus 65 companies, Rajan, also a smaller team, right? Sequoia company, by the way. They actually had clarified their ESOP policy at a very, very early stage, very, very early stage, and had a clear positive impact on their NPS, right? They were at 65. So the second piece, you don't need very formal performance systems, but clarity on how you will measure performance, how you will give feedback, and what the rewards really mean is a valuable thing to do even at this stage.
Yeah.
And the third area, sorry, Arun, you have something to add?
Just something to add there. The interesting thing here is PM and rewards rarely comes as a top of mind people issue in our conversations with early stage founders. But for people, it's a big thing. And it is broken across the ecosystem and even for small stage companies. And as Saiki was saying, I've heard in conversations that, you know, these are like startups where around 15% of the company is reserved for the ESOP pool, but people still say that, you know, hey, I have some paper money. I'm not very clear about how I will be rewarded for all the efforts I'm putting in to grow this.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, guys, because I think in early stage, a lot of the comp is very ESOP heavy, but ESOPs are not easy for people to understand, right? And just so that everybody knows, even at very large stage, trillion-dollar companies, even sort of senior leaders sometimes don't understand how to interpret what their comp is, your total comp is, right? For the longest time, even at Google, people would be like, hey, but my comp is only this. I'm like, yeah, but you also have this restricted stock that adds up to a lot more, right? So I think this is such an important point, just making sure everybody understands, because it's such a big part of their comp is ESOPs.
Exactly. And you have to do a little bit of the thought exercise of explaining how it will, that early stock, how it has a compounding effect over time. And when people get it, they get it. And then the conversation changes from, hey, can I be paid more? To can you give me a bigger grant, right? Which is what you want, which is exactly what you want. And then the third topic for smaller teams is founder as a manager, which is you don't escape manager NPS because you're a smaller team. The manager is you. And the challenge is 5 out of those 11 smaller startups have a founder MNPS of less than 10. So one thing it's important for each of you to keep in mind is that your personal manager or leadership behavior is under the spotlight for most of your team members. And the things that get called out are fairness, micromanagement, I'm not given space. And you can see some of the quotes here that trust the people you hired to do their jobs. Don't be judgmental and don't have opinions so quickly about us. So you kind of have to watch out. We know founders have a lot to worry about, but remember you are under the spotlight and everyone's looking at you in terms of your behavior. So this has a disproportionate effect on employee NPS for smaller teams in particular. So overall, to summarize, 3 things to take away as a younger startup. One is org principles, very important. It's going to be your source of strength. And the team around you needs to radiate this, not just you. And performance management and your own management style are important areas to focus on. Otherwise, they'll pull you down to the lower end of the employee NPS. Okay. We're going to move from here to make it real for me. What are the pieces I need to focus on, which was that whole Greek temple and the 2-3 areas to worry about, now to looking around the corner and what starts happening at growth stage. Before I do that, any other questions or comments?
Hey, just on this, are you going to spend more time on this founder as a manager and things to do and things not to do? I mean, you called out some of them like micromanagement, fairness. Is there more on that, Psyche?
So we haven't planned it for today. We can do a follow-up chat with those who are interested, Rajan, if required. What we're going to do is we are going to double click a bit on one, because if as founders you spend time on one, that automatically gives you a lot of positives on everything, right? Because it's the foundational piece. So we'll start with one today, Rajan.
Got it. And then Prashant also wants to know on 2. By the way, we also run a session at Surge called "Don't Be a Disastrous Manager," or what is it called? No, "Don't Be a Nightmare Manager."
Don't be a nightmare manager.
You know, it's for our new founders who are new managers. I mean, it's not applicable to our seasoned founders.
Yeah.
But okay, all right, keep going now.
Okay. Let's look around the corner a bit, guys, which is as you get to growth stage and you start scaling beyond a 100-member team. As I mentioned, your employee NPS, the median employee NPS falls from 51 to 34, which means as you get bigger, employee NPS falls almost by default. And these are the things that happen. One is the culture dilution, and particularly early team members saying the culture we built in the early days is gone, right? And I remember us sort of having to wrestle with this at Flipkart as well. And continuously wrestle with this. So a lot of work starts becoming required to reinforce the principles. The second is from founder as a manager to managers as managers. Suddenly you will have other members of the team play that manager role, right? And that's where you need to worry about the fact that managers typically struggle with this dimension. So feedback sessions, being effective in problem solving and being fair in performance management, those are the things that teams expect from their managers. Decision making becomes a big deal, which is what in a 20-30 member team, people can just come up to you and ask you, or everyone knows everything anyway. But decision making, saying now the founder is just doing something, I have no idea why they're doing it, becomes a big deal. So cultivating the habit of explaining key decisions, why you did this, why you didn't do something else, becomes very important. And a 45% in the bottom quartile companies actually call out decision making as something that's broken. And it's not the decision itself, it's the clarity, transparency, and the explanations around it that starts mattering, the emails, the all hands, and the Q&A that you do around key decisions. And finally, the performance management and rewards, which is the sense of unfairness, which is, hey, only people who are known to the founders end up doing well. There's no fairness. My manager hates me. I'm being evaluated unfairly. That actually starts to become a much more serious problem as you cross 100 people. So looking around the corner, these are 4 areas you'll have to start thinking about. The first one you'll think about anyway, but what are the managers and how do you train them? How do you make your decisions more transparent? And how do you create a clear and fair performance management framework? Each of these, Rajan, to your point, there is a certain how-to and a set of basic, simple practices and principles of how to do them well. So folks in the group are curious, then we can do it in follow-up conversations, right? Now let's hear from let's hear from, we asked a few founders who are at the growth stage to say, hey, if you were a younger founder today, what advice would you give to your younger self? And here's what they had to say.
Hey guys, Vidit here from Misho. Congratulations to all of you for getting into search. Today I'm going to share one small advice, something that would have been great if we knew it as founders when we started the company. As we started to scale up, the company became larger, we started to realize that some of the guys in the company are making certain decisions that we would never take as founders, like against our values. And then we realized that all of this was happening because we never kind of did anything about communicating what our values are. We have realized there's no better investment you can do in building a great team than to start investing in culture, which is formalizing values, communicating it to your team, and making a part of life.
You need to hire missionary people. That's point number one. Second is make sure that you hire people with a 12-month orientation. In the initial days, reducing the noise and just focusing on the next 12 months is extremely critical. Third thing is, once you recruit high quality people, what you need to also do is set up the right org design and the right culture. You cannot expect these high performing guys to come and just operate on their own. You as founders, as co-founders, as CEOs will have to align the interests and will have to keep on doing that from every quarter to quarter.
If given an opportunity to redo, what I would love to look at is probably having not really an head of HR per se, but definitely someone, maybe a very junior guy also, but someone who is like close to the founders, and his or her job is to simply like look at what is the core behaviors of these founders and just trying to make that documenting that, first of all identifying that, documenting that, and just ensuring that that's being relayed over and over and over again inside the organization in multiple forums, right? It's a very basic thing, but believe me, reiteration of that message, which is basically the founder's way of doing things. Because see, ultimately at an early stage company, the founder's way of doing things and behaviors are essentially culture, and there is no beating around the bush on that.
So I think the interesting thing about this is all of them talked about the documenting culture piece. And that's not a coincidence, by the way. We didn't give them a script. These are completely from the heart messages, guys. That org principles piece or that manifesto piece, which is writing down what you stand for, all three of them talked about it. I think Sumit also made the very interesting point about the managers you hire. Hire the missionaries that will represent the culture that you want them to represent, and be very thoughtful, which is that looking around the corner piece about who are the managers you're bringing into your team, right? So some thoughtful advice from founders who are sort of at the growth stage, looking back to what they wish they had done at an earlier stage. Okay, so now we'll go from what have we done so far? We've said NPS is important, pay attention. Without it, you have high attrition and bad things happen. There is an operating framework that you can actually work on to get a high NPS. There is no stage like the present to start thinking about it. As a younger team, you're bias positive, but there are those three things to worry about: org principles, perf, and your own style as managers. And you've heard from growth stage founders saying, as you look around the corner, there are 2 or 3 things that you need to start working on right now. And everyone talked about this one piece, so we'll talk about it as well, which is the org manifesto. And how do you get started? Org manifesto is just a document that represents that culture or the principles that you stand for. And on that note, I'll invite Neeraj. Has a unique vantage point because having been at Flipkart, where we looked at culture as an area where we all thought we should have done better. He and a bunch of ex-Flipkart guys actually were part of the founding team at CureFit. And then they did things a little bit differently. So let me ask Neeraj to share his story on the org manifesto piece.
Thank you so much, Saiki. Good afternoon to all of you. As Arun and Psyche, spoke about earlier, the importance of articulating your org principles cannot be overstated as you go about building your companies. And one really sort of effective way of doing it is to put together what we call the org manifesto, or the org constitution, as some companies like to call it. It serves as a design note for your companies. I remember we in xto10x put together our manifesto just about the time we were starting out. 2 years ago, we had about 4 or 5 people in the company at that point in time, including the 3 co-founders. And frankly, our own inspiration for putting that document together came from the Kyofit constitution that I had encountered when I had left Flipkart and I was looking at options for my next career move. I still remember very, very distinctly the day Ankit and Mukesh gave me their constitution that they have put together during my discussions with them. And that document went on to become the biggest reason for me joining them, actually. I remember reading it and thinking to myself that even if they got 50% right of what was written in the document, this would be a really good place to work in. And forget 50%, I think they went on to live the document 100% day in and day out. And that's why the company became so special for people to work in. Now, what did the constitution really contain that was so fascinating for me? Look, it spoke about the whys of why the company was really being created, both for the core beliefs and the purpose sort of sections in the document. But the document didn't stop at that. As most sort of value documents you find in most companies, the document actually went several steps further. There was this complete section on the workplace practices that you would expect employees would expect to find in the company. For example, they said very clearly that we will not have a formal HR function in the company because people management is the core responsibility of every manager in the company, right? They also said, for example, that they will not have titles in the company. They will not have any designations because they believe that free flow of ideas and information actually got impeded by titles in companies. They also had a lot of information on the sort of core people processes around performance, talent management, compensation in the company. I remember reading this in the document way back. The note on performance, the design thinking behind performance was that performance evaluation and feedback is a very personal thing. And hence every individual will have a personal performance cycle linked to his date of joining. If I join in January, my performance feedback would happen in July and January. Somebody else joined in February, their performance feedback would happen in August and February. So very, very personal, linked to every person's sort of date of joining. And I thought that was very unique about the company. Having been in Flipkart for so many years, this is the one thing that we all felt was really missing in Flipkart from an employee's perspective. A common understanding of the culture of the company, a common understanding of the sort of key design thinking behind the workplace practices that we had. And to see this amount of thought being given to these important areas in Kyofit was very, very refreshing and very inspiring to me personally. And that's why we in xto10x also put together our own manifesto 2 years ago. It's a document that we hold very dear to our hearts. It's a document we spend a lot of time and energy on every single day, even today. And I'm gonna, we're now gonna present to you our manifesto, give you our manifesto, just to make it real.
I just want to point out one thing in what you said, Neeraj, which struck me as you were speaking, which is Ankit and Mukesh using that constitution at Kyofit to talk to Neeraj when he was considering joining the team is a masterstroke, absolute masterstroke. I mean, obviously, anyone getting you to join their team is sort of could consider themselves very fortunate, Neeraj. But that, on a serious note, putting that document in front of prospective team members so they know what they're signing up for and they have a deep sense of this is the company we're going to be a part of, means people who want to be there select in and people who don't want to be there walk away. So you end up creating a very nice self-selection mechanism for getting people who care about your mission, even at the point of hiring, not just for something you do after they've joined the team, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So now I shared with you the manifesto that we put together at xto10x in the chat window. Please take a look at it. Spend a couple of minutes going through it, and then we'll be happy to sort of take your reflections and your sort of thoughts on this document. We want to make it real for you in terms of what a manifesto really looks like, and hence this link is being shared.
So this is just to be clear, this is not about us saying this is the best manifesto in the world. This is just us saying this is the personal reflection of what we stand for and why we care about this. And your version will look very different. Like as Neeraj described CureFit's manifesto, it's some things that are very, very unique to CureFit. So this is not about downloading and copy pasting Netflix, Google, and Amazon's leadership principles, right? It's the furthest thing from that. It's about the thing about you that makes you special.
Okay, this is awesome. And it's not very long, right? What I like about it is it's actually quite something that everybody can read every couple of weeks even.
Yeah.
Also very specific.
Everyone had a chance to go through it or still reading?
I like the lack of policies or the lack thereof. I'm reading No Rules by Reed Hastings and Erin.
Yeah.
Like your first one there, right? Which is leave. There will be no cap on number of days one can take leave. Every individual can take the days off that she wants.
And when someone posts
expenses,
on Slack,
no approval.
When someone goes on Slack saying I'm going on leave for whatever next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and everyone claps and celebrates. So there is it's had some funky impact, Rajan. Some people are saying we don't feel like taking leave because there's so much work to do. So there's no leave policy. Is maybe better to have a leave policy. So it has interesting manifestation.
This is exactly what this part of it is exactly what Netflix. This whole idea of no rules, right?
Yeah.
But it works when you have very high performing talent. It's just one of your other points.
I mean, you can see, Rajan, this is, you've got to commit. It puts you out there, right? And we get called out on stuff that people think we're not fully complying with. And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Neeraj, you're getting a bunch of comments in the...
Yeah. I mean, it's very powerful. For employees, as Saiki mentioned toward the end, it actually allows employees to hold founders and leaders accountable to what you've called out as workplace practices and sort of key employee processes. Most of the time, founders expect a lot from people, and we're not very clear about what we will give them. I think the manifesto is a way of actually clarifying what they can expect from the company also.
Okay, so Suvida from Colon has a question, guys. Can they use this template, broad outline?
Of course. This is not meant for. This is not IP. This is absolutely open for consumption.
Yeah, we'd be proud. And if you come up with a document you're proud of, then your payback to us would be just share your document with us. We'd love to see it. We'd love to see it. So
I would try my best. I'm a new addition to Colon, so yeah, thank you. I will definitely share when it's ready.
Lovely. Should we keep going, Neeraj?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me go back. Okay, Arun.
Yeah. So what we have attempted to do is we have broken down the entire manifesto creation process into 3 questions. These are 3 questions which you have to answer. As Saiki was mentioning, this can't be like a Netflix manifesto or xto10x manifesto. This has to be like a very personal, inside out reflective exercise. And these are the 3 questions where you start with. Question number 1 is, why do you exist? And as you write this down, you should also ask these questions to yourself in terms of, does it clarify what your startup will do, will not do? The important thing is to not make it too hazy, and also not to make it as like your 1 to 2 year goals or OKRs. So that's the important thing to keep as like a standard here. And this should be personally inspiring for you. This must be like very deeply reflective, and this should inspire you. The second one is around your mission, which is just looking at like, what would you like to see yourself if an article comes about your company 2 years down the lane, what would you like to see? And the third one are the values and the behaviors, which is going to help you achieve what, question number 1 and question number 2, what you're going to write, right? And this again are something which is also will be derived a lot from your own personal values also. But this is something, once you put it down, then it becomes like almost like a way of life. And then you hire accordingly, then you assess people accordingly. So again, something which you put down. So what we will do is we will share like a template with you, and we would like to do a small exercise now where Sonali will share the template. It will be in form of a Google Doc. You can create a copy of it, and we're going to try taking a stab at some of these questions and attempt to put down your own manifesto, especially this is the preamble part of the manifesto, which is the why, what, how of your startup, and what really makes you special, right? So that's what we would do. We'll have 10 minutes.
5 minutes. Let's take 5.
5 minutes. Yeah, I think we only have 5 minutes. So let's take 5 minutes.
Yeah, and feel free to write down whatever sort of is in your minds and hearts. You don't have to submit this back to us or anything. So this is just your own rough notes. While you're in the thick of this discussion, please jot down your answers to these 3 questions. And on the third question is the values, behaviors. This is not about what you want to be. This is about who you are. What's special about you today? What's something in the way your team is today that makes you guys special? That's what you should write in sort of the values and behaviors to question 3.
Yeah. 20% can be like more aspirational, what you don't have today, 20%, with a very clear plan in terms of how you look to get there. But 80% have to be like what you are today.
All right, guys, 5 minutes. Reflection time. Rajan, you can do it for Surge.
We went through this exercise, Psyche. Peter, who's on the call, I don't know whether Peter is still here. Peter runs a session at Surge on culture and values.
Yeah, I'm here, guys.
There we go. So Peter, actually, we went through it at Surge. It took us like several months.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite a it was quite a great, it was a really good exercise, actually.
Yeah.
We should share our what we came up with, you guys.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Actually, Peter should share it.
That'd be lovely. We'd love to see it. All right, guys, let's take a minute or 2 more. I just had a look at the clock and realized we do need another 10-15 minutes for what we have planned. So take a minute more, perhaps, jot down some quick thoughts, and then we'll come back. Okay, lovely. I mean, obviously, as Rajan said, this is an exercise that sometimes takes months. I know we did. I remember we had lots of vigorous debates amongst Neeraj, Bini, and myself as we put this together. And a lot of words. We had about choosing words that we thought got it just right. Hopefully the 2-minute exercise made the point that this requires deep thought. It doesn't naturally sort of, you may not get the answer in 2 or 3 minutes. It requires deep thought. You may want to pull in your co-founders, leadership team members, all of that into this exercise. And if you want some help on how to do this well, I'm sure Arun would be happy to share some tips. Let's keep going. The next step, again, is a little bit of work for each of you to do. I think, Sonali, you will share the link in the chat.
Done that.
Okay. So if you click through the link that Sonali just posted, guys, this gives you 10 questions to answer on your people engagement and culture. Some reflection questions for how you're doing at the moment. Please answer them as honestly as possible. It's just for your own consumption. And then we'll spend a few minutes debriefing and sharing takeaways from the session. Rajan, you can also take it, I think, in Everyone's got the link? Thumbs up?
Yeah.
Either real thumbs or emojis.
Yeah, I think we did. It's in the chat group, guys.
By the way, as you're reading the assessment, in case you miss it, at the bottom, you see some real practices that various startups are following on those dimensions. So you can pick up some tips along the way as well. Okay, I can see 4 responses are already in. I must say this tool is very cool, Sonali. I'm enjoying it myself.
Also a quick way, right? It's like a quick pulse check.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the dashboard of the results already filled, like the summary dashboard, Rajan.
Oh, how do we find that?
I'm going to share it with this group once everyone is done.
Okay, I only got asked my score.
Hey, Bahadir can't get the link. Sonali, can you repost it, please? You will get only your score, but I'll have a group summary at the end.
Okay, cool.
Some little bit of tech wizardry from the xto10x tech team. Real-time online feedback. Fascinating. Results are fascinating. How many people do we have in the group? I have 10 responses in so far.
There are about 10 of us from Sequoia Surge, so maybe 20, 25 founders, something like that.
Okay, so we'll still give it a minute or two. super interesting. Are you also seeing the live results, Sonali? I feel like I'm watching an IPL match.
Yes, I am.
Oh, wow. Okay, we see it now. Oh, wow. This is really interesting. Now we can see the percentages, right? That's what we should be looking at.
Are you looking at the aggregate results?
Yeah, I think we can all see it, right, guys? Everybody, if you refresh,
Oh
you
no,
can see startups who responded yes.
that's like you're taking, that was like the cool, I was supposed to share that, Rajan.
Oh, okay. Please share it then.
No, I'm waiting
for on my screen. So
I'm waiting for folks to finish. We've got 14 responses.
Yeah, let's go ahead. I think.
Let's go. Okay, here we go. All right, everyone can see.
15 now, Saki. You want to just refresh it one more time?
Just refresh. Yeah, 15. All right, fascinating. So the overall 15 responses from the group, average score of 6.5 out of 10. A yes is scored as 10, a no is scored as 0, and a partial is scored as 5. So our average across all the questions is 6.5. If you look at the colors here, the greens are stuff that we're doing well. So the area we're doing really well on is like we're valuing the opinions of our team members, which is fabulous. And there are no reds on team opinion. So as a group, we're doing really well on listening to our teams. We're also doing well on communication and reasonably well on goal alignment, appreciation, and team growth. So those are the areas, sort of the top 5 greens. If you go to the other end of the spectrum and you look at some of the reds, interestingly, the area we've talked about the most today, which is the whole culture, clarity, and having a manifesto, having it clear, that's when we have the most no's, which is interesting. So as a group, we feel that's an area we need to work on the most, and some yellows as well. And the whole talent piece and feedback also seem like areas that need work. And if you look at the questions, the talent piece is actually more around hiring the right talent. So that's what we've referred to here. So you look at the scores we've got as a group, the clarity about values culture, the whole manifesto piece that we kind of kick-started today seems to be the area that everyone in the group or most in the group feel we need to get started right away. And then this whole hiring piece and feedback piece are the next two. So Rajan, here you have some takeaways at a cohort level for sort of the 2-3 areas that the group feels they want to sort of get going with.
Yeah.
And I think everyone would have also got your own your feedback sort of back in email, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fabulous. So this is a good page to leave up there. Folks, we have another 3 or 4 minutes to sort of debrief. Would love to go around the room and hear from each of you or many of you as founders saying, what's the one thing that you would want to do now, having been a part of this session? What's the one thing you'd want to do or give some serious thought to? It'd be lovely to go around and do a quick checkout before we conclude.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go around the room. It'd be great to have each of the founders or maybe one person from each company. I know in a few companies we have more than one person. Who wants to start? What's the one thing you might do differently or you might do as a result of today's session? That's a good one.
Hey, hi, Suvida here from CoLearn. Like I said, I'm a newest member, and I'm not a founder. I'm representing them as best as I can. I think the biggest takeaway for me is to write that manifesto for CoLearn. I think that's something that I really, really want to do. And I think Mark and Abhay and Sandeep would agree with me as well when I speak with them about it, if they've not already seen it. So that's my takeaway. Thank you again for a really great session. Very helpful.
Thanks, Suvida.
Great, Suvida. Thank you. Who's next?
Hi everyone, I'm Kirti from Animal. I think my biggest takeaway would be to do the ENPS survey every fortnight. We've been doing it, let's say maybe once in 3 months. We are much smaller as a team, but I think in the next 2-3 months we'll have a lot of new people joining in, and this could be a good way to keep in sync with everyone.
That's a great takeaway, Kirti. I don't know whether you want to do the ENPS survey in its entirety every fortnight. What's a good? But you guys, how big is the team now, Kirti, at Animal?
Actually, we are about 16 people now.
Oh, you're 16. Okay. What's a good frequency, Psyche, Neeraj, Arun, and team on a team with 15, 20 people?
So the whole thing we say like once in 6 months is good enough. But a few pulse questions, the overall question and a few pulse questions once a month is about right. And then it's not just the survey, Kirti, it's also the conversations. So you remember Arun talked about 1,500 conversations. None of us aspire to Arun's greatness, but I think the mixing the survey with a minimum sample of one-on-one chats you want to have, just freewheeling, that's when you get the magic mix, right? For everyone who, by the way, wants to actually use the tool, as you can imagine, we've now taken this to a complete level of insanity in terms of what to measure, how to measure, when to measure, etc., etc. So Sonali will share the feedback form. If you want to sort of use the tool, that's something we'll be happy to figure out with you guys. But you can sort of log it in the feedback sheet.
Sure.
So I think Kirti, this is for Kirti and everybody else. I would recommend at least once every 6 months.
Sure.
Using the entire ENPS survey, right? Because it's very deep. And then I think, Kirti, what you're talking about is more of a pulse check, right? Like what we just did.
Yeah.
Which is
So
5, 6,
Neeraj
7.
said something about once in 15 days is the recommended frequency for early stage companies. I thought that's for the survey.
That was for the one-on-ones, Kirti. That was for the one-on-ones.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it'd be great, Kirti, to have you guys take the whole ENPS thing and see where you are today.
And as Suvida said, by the way, this is what we've talked about today is the measurement and the manifesto are the first 3 baby steps on the journey. I think eventually building that whole house. If anyone wants to get a little bit deeper on that, again, log it in the feedback form. Sonali's just shared the link to the feedback form, guys. Please fill it. Honestly, for us, the xto10x team, that's our payback for the session. So we liked it. Please do fill the feedback form. Even if you didn't like it, fill the feedback form. So please fill before you go. And as you guys fill, we can also continue the checkout process. Who'd like to sort of go next and share takeaways?
Yeah, Chris, you want to go for Kuala?
Yeah. Hey, this is Srihari and I'm representing Hippo Video. I do know that Srini, a co-founder, has also joined, but I'd like to take a stab. I think one of the most finest key takeaways for me is to
hey, Srihari, your connection, I don't know whether it's just me, but your connection, I don't know. Can you guys hear Srihari?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, so I'll try to speak up, but that's all I can do. So my finest key takeaways from this session is hearing about what Google does, right? To really pin up performance management or compensation management with managerial effectiveness. Now, that drives behavior, right? You can't really drive behavior other than having a best practice like that. So I think for a company of a size of 100 plus, where Hippo Video is at this point in time, my score was 9.5 when I took that assessment. So I think some of the improvement areas could probably be the managerial effectiveness areas. And I think discussing about pinning up performance management and compensation management with managerial effectiveness would be the get-go for us. Thanks for the session, everybody.
Okay, ma'am.
I'm sorry about that.
Hi guys, I'm Chris. I'm representing Harshit and Tommy from Koala. I think we're definitely in that second part or that second category where we're in kind of the growth stage. We're roughly 200 people. And I think you guys kind of nailed it on the head in identifying what the problems would be for a larger company, in the sense that performance and rewards are becoming significantly more prominent in terms of the feedback that we're getting from employees, as well as the managers. So I think in Indonesia, we're generally larger companies. And so I think now we're trying to figure out how do we build out that level 2 between the founders and the VPs and finally the front line. So these are very clear, the 2 items that we want to work on, but the manifesto will be extremely important. I think we've given it a go in terms of 1 draft. However, that does need to be refined. And I think just putting and establish that into our hiring practice where every single candidate actually, self-screens and self-filters them, whether or not they actually are good for the job and good for the company. So I think that's a fantastic process that we're looking to put in place. Appreciate the session, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, Saiki. This is Badir from Irolo. Thank you for the session. This has been amazing. Thank you and your team. I think my biggest takeaway was we are very verbal in a lot of things that we do with our employees, and we do like to think that they trust us and they like where they are. But I after seeing your manifesto, I fully believe that we should have a more structured approach to everything, so that there are no questions hanging around where we also don't have the answer and where we need to improvise. So this was very important for me. If I may, Niraj, I have one quick question, which I kind of hoped that. I mean, it's not a very important question, but when you were giving the Culfeed example, you said one of the things that they did was they decided not to have a formal HR, which sounds okay. But then you mentioned for free flow of ideas, they also decided no titles. What I was wondering is how doable is that in real life? We just hired a VP of growth from a huge marketing company, and I cannot imagine a world where I get to tell him that, dude, how you were the VP of everything in that company, here you have no title. Or is this no title thing kind of like I'm just trying to understand what it means to have no titles. Then who reports to whom? Who makes the decisions? Or what is the way to execute that in real life?
It's a great question, Bahadur. I think there were definitely debates every now and then on the no title philosophy. But a lot of people who came in from the earlier companies that they were working in at senior levels, were very clear that there would be no titles in the company. So they were very aligned with that philosophy. The thinking was very simple that yes, you would have project managers and you would have, for example, you would have, let's say, people owning up Cult or Reach. And ultimately, they would be accountable for your sort of performance, your sort of assessment. But the concept was that you're not tied to one leader. You could work on a project for 6 months to 9 months, move on to another project in the company. The idea was to keep it fluid. The idea was not to really have very, very deeply functional teams in the company. It started off as an experiment, Bahadur, and I think now they're about 4 years old, and they've still stuck to that particular philosophy. It's doing really well for them. It's become a way of life. It's tough. It's not easy for sure. But if you really believe in making that happen, I think you offer an example of a company that's made it happen. So, but yeah, I would say, attempt it only and only you're absolutely sure that you want to go all the way to making it happen, because it can be really tough every now and then when new people come into the company.
I think normalizing roles versus titles or designations would probably be a good start. We can have X number of roles, but not really titles. And then that demarcates it. That's my 2 cents for that question, if you will.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. And one ignorant questions from me. I was like, where can we actually find the really good NPS survey? Is this something I just go online and we've never done this before? So I don't even know where to start.
So in the feedback form, I think you can mention whether we actually have a tool, Bahadur. So the reason we have so much data is because we have a tool that many startups are using.
So we can come to you.
Yeah, we can just do it for you. Very affordable, by the way. You don't need to worry about it.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
it's
just to build on that, guys, this is a SaaS product that the Saiki, Neeraj, and the team have from xto10x. So I encourage all of you, to kind of, try it once, get the data, see what it is, and then they can also, they have multiple levels of service, right? Service products, Saiki, in terms of levels of engagement, I should say.
Yeah.
So I think everyone.
Short answer is you want to continue the conversation either on the tool or help with the performance management. We do all of that stuff and we do it for startups. So very happy to continue the conversation offline.
All right, great. I think we're
out of time.
Hey, but thank you very much, Saiki, Neeraj, Arun, and the team. This has been extremely helpful. I think you'll get a lot of requests. We're hoping.
Thanks so much, Rajan.
And please do let us know, by the way, as search companies sign up Psyche, let us know, and Sonali. We'd love to create a surge index. We definitely want to be way above the median. We do all this and we're at the median. That would be kind of sad.
I'm still digesting your MNPS 80 point, Rajan. Yeah. So I'm sure you'll do something dangerous with the surge index. Yeah, would love to do that. All right, we'll continue the chat, Rajan. Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Right, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Joy. Thanks, Goodbye, guys.
Thank you, everyone. This was fantastic. Thank you.